The city of Portland, Oregon, had never felt so silent. At first, it was almost peaceful. The usual noise of cars, chatter, and city life had dwindled to a whisper. A calm that didn't promise safety but rather something far worse, an eerie stillness that sent shivers down the spine of anyone who dared to notice. Jacob Pierce stood at the edge of the rooftop garden atop the old library, scanning the empty streets below with binoculars. His breath came out in shallow puffs against the cold morning air. The streets that were once bustling with life now looked like ghostly veins threading through the city. No sounds of footsteps, no barking dogs, no children's laughter, only silence. "Where is everyone?" he muttered under his breath. His voice felt loud, out of place, almost invasive in the unnerving quiet. Jacob had been a paramedic before the outbreak. Now, he was something else entirely, a survivor trying to piece together the fragments of a world that was rapidly falling apart. Days ago, reports came of a strange sickness spreading fast, turning people into mindless creatures that moved in silence. They called them the Silent Walkers. No groans, no cries, just slow, relentless pursuit. The news channels had gone dark. Phones no longer worked. The internet was patchy, unreliable. And as the days dragged on, the dead were no longer confined to cemeteries. They walked among the living, unseen until it was too late. Jacob adjusted his binoculars and caught a glimpse of movement near the far end of the street. A figure shuffled forward, awkward, jerky, like a puppet with broken strings. Its eyes were vacant, glazed with something that shouldn't be human. It was one of them, the Silent Walkers. His heart hammered. The years of training kicked in as he grabbed his rifle and quietly moved back into the shadows. He knew better than to confront one alone. These creatures were different, not loud, not frantic, but patient. They watched, waited for the perfect moment to strike. Suddenly, a crack echoed from below, a car alarm blaring into the silence. Jacob's head snapped down. More of the Silent Walkers were appearing now, drawn to the noise. Their faces were expressionless, and their hands stretched out as if reaching for something lost in a forgotten past. The city was falling, and the first wave was here. Jacob ran back inside the building, slamming the rooftop door shut behind him. He had to find the others. Survivors. Anyone. In the dim hallway, voices whispered behind the locked doors of the makeshift safe house the group had set up days ago. The group was small, a handful of strangers bound by the desperate need to survive. Sarah, the former nurse, Malik, the ex-firefighter, and Elena, a young tech genius who still clung to the hope of finding a way to communicate with the outside world. "Jacob," Sarah whispered urgently when he entered, "they're everywhere now. We need to move. The barricades won't hold." Jacob's jaw tightened. The barricades had been their fragile shield, but even steel and wood couldn't keep the Silent Walkers out forever. And the longer they stayed, the more dangerous it became. "Where do we go?" Malik asked, his voice low but steady. "North. The old military base outside the city," Jacob said. "If the government's still holding, that's where help will be." Elena shook her head. "It's a long shot. No one's come through on the radio for days." Jacob didn't answer. Hope was a luxury none of them could afford. But they had to try. Staying put meant death. The group gathered supplies quietly, flashlights, canned food, makeshift weapons. Outside, the sun was dipping below the horizon, casting long shadows that seemed to swallow the city whole. As they slipped out through the back exit, Jacob's mind raced. Every creak, every whisper of the wind made him flinch. The Silent Walkers moved through the streets like ghosts, never rushing, never tiring. The first night of their escape was the hardest. The city was an endless maze of abandoned cars, shattered windows, and the lingering scent of decay. Somewhere in the distance, a dog howled. It was the only sound that wasn't swallowed by the silence. At one point, they stumbled upon a small group of survivors holed up in a grocery store. But the moment the silent walkers appeared, those survivors panicked. The chaos was immediate, guns fired, screams rang out, and in minutes, the store was overrun. Jacob's group barely escaped with their lives. By dawn, the city was unrecognizable. Streets were littered with abandoned belongings, bloodstains drying on cracked pavement. The silent walkers moved slowly but surely, closing in on every corner of the city. Jacob's hands trembled as he reloaded his rifle. He glanced at his small group, exhausted, terrified, but still alive. "This is only the beginning," he said quietly. "The fall of dead America has started. And we're right in the middle of it." In the distance, the silent walkers stopped at the edge of a playground. A little girl's doll lay forgotten in the sand, a silent reminder of a world that once was. Jacob swallowed hard. There would be no turning back now. "Would you like me to continue with part 2 next?" The first light of dawn seeped through the cracked windows of an abandoned convenience store where Jacob and his small group had taken refuge for the night. Outside, the city of Portland was cloaked in a thin, unnatural fog that seemed to mute every sound, except for the distant, relentless shuffle of the silent walkers. Jacob sat against a cold metal shelf, his rifle resting across his knees. His eyes never stopped scanning the dim interior, alert to every creak and whisper. He felt the weight of the world crushing down on his shoulders, the knowledge that every moment counted, every decision meant life or death. Sarah huddled beside him, her eyes red-rimmed and hollow from a sleepless night. "How much farther is this military base?" she asked quietly, voice cracked but determined. Jacob's jaw tightened. "About 20 miles north. If the reports are true, they might still have supplies, maybe even troops." Malik leaned against the wall, cleaning a knife with slow, deliberate strokes. "If there's anyone left to help, we'll find them there," he said. "But this city, it's a tomb." Elena, ever the optimist despite the bleakness, tapped on her small handheld device, a battered radio she'd managed to salvage. "I'm trying to reach anyone. Any frequencies, anything." Static filled the room, punctuated by faint, indecipherable voices buried beneath the noise. But no clear message came through. "Nothing yet," she sighed, frustration tightening her fingers around the device. Jacob pushed himself to his feet. "We can't wait here. The silent walkers are closing in. Staying means we die." The group gathered their meager supplies, water bottles, canned food, a few extra batteries for flashlights, and prepared to move out. Outside, the fog had lifted, but an oppressive silence had settled over the streets. The air smelled of smoke and rot, an invisible reminder of the chaos that had swallowed the city whole. As they stepped out onto the cracked pavement, Jacob's eyes caught movement near the corner of a building. A shadow, unmoving, barely visible. "Silent walker," he whispered. "Stay sharp." The creature was grotesque in its stillness. Skin hung in tatters, eyes dead and glassy. It seemed almost statuesque, but Jacob knew better. The silent walkers didn't rush, but they never stopped. Like hunters stalking their prey, patient and unforgiving. The group moved cautiously down the street, their footsteps swallowed by the thick carpet of fallen leaves and debris. Every sound was amplified in the eerie quiet, the crunch of gravel, the rustle of wind-blown paper, the distant drip of water from a broken pipe. Suddenly, Elena froze. "Do you hear that?" A faint tapping echoed from the alley to their left. A rhythmic, deliberate noise, almost like a heartbeat. Jacob raised his rifle. "Stay behind me." They edged closer, weapons ready. The tapping grew louder, accompanied by low moans that sent chills through their bones. From the shadows emerged a group of silent walkers, but these were different. Their movements were slower, more mechanical, almost as if controlled by some unseen force. Jacob's grip tightened on the rifle. "They're adapting. They're learning." Sarah swallowed hard. How do you fight something that keeps changing? Malik scanned the alley. By not getting caught. The group backed away slowly, retracing their steps to avoid drawing attention. But as they turned, a sudden crash echoed behind them. Boxes and debris fell from a nearby storefront, scattering into the street. The silent walkers reacted instantly. Their vacant eyes locked on the noise, and they began to move, silent and relentless. "Run!" Jacob shouted. They broke into a desperate sprint, pounding down the street as the silent walkers glided after them with terrifying speed. Jacob's lungs burned. He glanced back, seeing the creatures close in, their outstretched hands nearly grazing his back. They burst into a narrow side street and slammed the door of a boarded-up cafe shut behind them. Malik jammed a metal chair under the handle, and for a moment, they were safe. Breathing heavily, Jacob pressed his back against the door. "We can't keep running like this." Sarah nodded. "We need a plan." Elena fiddled with her radio, but the static had grown worse, the faint voices now gone. "There's nothing out there. No rescue. No help." Malik shook his head grimly. "Then we survive on our own." Suddenly, a faint sound filtered through the walls, a soft, urgent tapping. Like Morse code. Elena's eyes widened. "Wait. That's not random. Someone's trying to communicate." Jacob motioned for silence. The tapping continued, tap, tap, pause, tap, tap, tap. Sarah bit her lip. "It's coming from across the street. That old church." Jacob exchanged a glance with Malik. "We have to check it out. It could be survivors." Gathering their courage, they stepped outside again. The silent walkers had moved on, their eerie procession melting into the shadows. The church loomed ahead, its stained glass windows shattered and its heavy wooden doors hanging ajar. Inside, the tapping continued, steady and rhythmic. Jacob pushed the door open cautiously, rifle raised. In the dim light, a young woman sat on the floor, banging two sticks together on a metal pipe. "Hey!" Jacob called softly. "We're not here to hurt you." She looked up, eyes wide with fear and relief. "Thank God. I thought I was alone." Her name was Lily. She explained that she'd been surviving in the church, using the tapping to signal anyone nearby, hopeful someone would hear her. Jacob nodded slowly. "We're heading north, to the military base. You want to come with us?" Lily hesitated but then nodded. "Yes. It's safer in numbers." As they gathered supplies and prepared to leave, Jacob felt a flicker of hope ignite in his chest. But even as they took their first steps out of the church, the sound of slow footsteps echoed behind them. The silent walkers were never far. And the fall of dead America was only beginning. Let me know when you're ready for part 3. The group moved cautiously through the early morning fog, their breaths visible in the cold air as they left the sanctuary of the church behind. Jacob's eyes never stopped scanning the shifting shadows, the weight of the rifle in his hands a constant reminder that death lurked everywhere. Lily walked close to Sarah, gripping her makeshift weapon tightly, an old crowbar that had seen better days. The young woman's eyes darted nervously to every corner, haunted by nights spent alone in the church. Now, she was thrust into a new nightmare, a journey toward a military base that might hold salvation, or doom. Malik led the way, moving with the steady confidence of someone who had seen fire and survived. His firefighter instincts sharpened his senses to danger lurking beneath the silence. "Stay close," Jacob whispered. "We can't afford to get separated." They trudged through the deserted streets, every step echoing like a gunshot in the stillness. The city that had once been vibrant now lay broken, streetlights flickering, cars abandoned mid-journey, shattered glass crunching underfoot. Suddenly, the fog shifted, revealing a figure ahead. A man, slumped against a lamppost, his clothes torn and face smeared with dirt and blood. Jacob signaled for the group to halt. Is he alive? They approached cautiously. The man's eyes fluttered open, and he groaned, a sound that was nearly human. "Help, please," he whispered. Sarah rushed forward, checking for injuries. "He's weak but breathing." Jacob glanced around. "We don't have time to carry him. We have to keep moving." The man's eyes locked on Jacob's. "Military base, not safe." Jacob frowned. "What do you mean?" The man coughed violently, blood staining his shirt. They've been taken, by them." Soldiers turned, worse than the walkers. A cold chill ran down Jacob's spine. Malik tightened his grip on his knife. "If the military is compromised, then what hope do we have?" Lily swallowed hard. "We can't turn back now." Jacob nodded grimly. "We keep going. We find out for ourselves." The man's gaze darkened. "There's something else. The walkers, they're changing. Becoming smarter, faster. They're planning." Elena's fingers tightened around her radio. "Planning? That's impossible." The man's breath was ragged. "I saw them. Not just wandering. They were hunting, like a pack." A sudden noise snapped their attention to the alley beside them. Leaves rustled as a group of silent walkers emerged, their movements sharper, almost deliberate. Jacob raised his rifle, firing a warning shot that echoed through the fog. The creatures halted, heads turning toward the sound. "Move!" Jacob ordered. They ran down the street, hearts pounding as the silent walkers followed, weaving through the fog like predators stalking prey. Turning a corner, they ducked into an old warehouse, slamming the door shut behind them. Malik propped a rusted metal beam against the entrance. Inside, darkness swallowed them, the only sound their ragged breaths. "We can't keep running like this," Sarah whispered, fear lacing her voice. "We need a plan." Jacob paced, mind racing. The military base had seemed like a beacon of hope, but now the man's warnings cast doubt. "We have no choice," Jacob said. "If the soldiers are gone or worse, we find out what happened. Then we survive." Lily sat in a corner, head in her hands. "What if there's no safe place left?" Elena looked up, eyes fierce. "There has to be. We just have to be smarter." Jacob nodded at Elena's resolve. "We'll stick together. Watch each other's backs." The group settled for a moment, gathering strength in the shadows. Outside, the fog thickened, swallowing the city in a blanket of white. Suddenly, a faint tapping echoed from the far end of the warehouse, a deliberate, rhythmic sound. Elena's eyes flickered. Someone else. Jacob motioned for silence. They crept toward the noise, weapons ready. In a corner, a young boy, no older than 10, sat banging two metal pipes together, his eyes wide with fear and hope. "Hey," Jacob said softly. "You're safe with us." The boy nodded, clutching a small stuffed bear. "They took my family." Sarah's face crumpled. "We'll protect you." The boy's name was Sam. Alone, scared, but still alive. As they moved deeper into the warehouse, Jacob felt the weight of responsibility settle on him. They were no longer just fighting for themselves but for every lost soul caught in the silent invasion. Outside, the fog shifted again, and in the distance, a soft groan broke the silence. The silent walkers were coming. And this time, they were hunting in packs. The warehouse walls seemed to close in as the group huddled together in the dim light, the faint tapping from Sam's pipes fading into a heavy silence. Jacob's fingers trembled slightly on his rifle as he tried to steady his breathing. Outside, the fog thickened, muffling all sounds but the distant, unsettling shuffles of the silent walkers closing in. "Something's wrong," Malik said, his voice low, eyes scanning the cracked windows. Jacob nodded. "They're organizing. These walkers, they're not just mindless anymore. They're hunting us. Sarah wrapped an arm around Lily, who shivered despite the thin blanket they had found. We can't stay here much longer, she said softly. Elena crouched beside Sam, who clung tightly to his stuffed bear. I'm still trying to pick up any radio signals, she said, fingers dancing over her handheld device. But everything's dead. Or being jammed. Jacob's jaw tightened. If someone's jamming the frequencies, it's not random. Someone, or something, is trying to keep us isolated. The group's eyes met, fear mirrored in each of their faces. The weight of the unknown pressed on them, heavier than any weapon. Suddenly, a sharp noise cut through the silence, a metallic clang echoing from the other side of the warehouse. Everyone froze. Jacob signaled for silence. Stay alert. Could be a walker, or worse. Slow footsteps followed the noise, careful but purposeful. Malik shifted, knife ready. From the shadows stepped a man, ragged and gaunt but very much alive. His clothes were torn, and a wild look burned in his eyes. Who are you? Jacob demanded. The stranger raised his hands slowly. Easy. I'm David. I've been hiding nearby. Sarah moved forward cautiously. How long? Days. I've seen them, the walkers, but also others, humans. Not all of us are gone. Jacob studied him carefully. What others? David swallowed hard. A faction, military survivors who don't want to help anyone else. They've taken over the base you're headed for. Malik frowned. What do you mean, taken over? David's voice dropped to a whisper. They're ruthless. They've turned against anyone they see as weak. I barely escaped. Elena's face paled. So even the military isn't safe? David nodded grimly. It's chaos out there. Worse than the walkers. Jacob's heart pounded. The hope of salvation at the base was slipping away. We have to keep moving, Jacob said. But now we know what we're up against. The group gathered their gear and prepared to leave the warehouse's shaky safety. As they stepped back into the thickening fog, the oppressive silence was broken by a distant scream, sharp and desperate. Lily gasped. That sounded close. Too close, Jacob said, scanning the foggy street. Suddenly, the fog shifted again. Shapes emerged, silent walkers, dozens of them, gliding toward the group like shadows detached from the mist. Run! Jacob shouted. They sprinted through the empty streets, heartbeats pounding louder than their footsteps. The walkers were relentless, their silent pursuit crushing all hope of escape. Turning a corner, Jacob spotted an old fire escape ladder dangling from a collapsed building. Up there, he yelled. They scrambled up, hands trembling on rusted metal. Once on the rooftop, they pulled themselves inside a broken window of an abandoned apartment. The silence returned, heavy and suffocating. From their perch, they could see the silent walkers roaming below, their vacant eyes scanning the streets like sentinels of death. Jacob looked at his group, exhausted, scared, but still breathing. We survived this, he vowed quietly. One step at a time. Hours passed with no sign of the walkers moving away. The city below was a graveyard, every sound magnified, every shadow a threat. As night fell, the fog deepened into a suffocating blanket that swallowed the city's ruins. Jacob's thoughts drifted to the man's warning, the ruthless faction at the base. What kind of people would turn on their own when the dead were at the gates? Sarah caught his gaze. We can't lose ourselves. Not now. Jacob nodded. We won't. We have to be better than them. For the sake of everyone left. Elena adjusted her radio one last time, but only static answered. Sam clutched his bear tighter, eyes wide in the darkness. Outside, a soft tapping began again, steady and slow, echoing through the night. The silent walkers were patient. And so was the enemy waiting in the shadows. The cold seeped through the cracked windows of the abandoned apartment where Jacob and his group had taken refuge. Outside, the city was silent, too silent, as if the world itself was holding its breath. The fog clung to the streets below like a suffocating shroud, hiding dangers both living and undead. Jacob rubbed his hands together, trying to stave off the chill. His thoughts churned with one persistent question: what kind of people had taken over the military base? The man's warning haunted him. Ruthless survivors who saw compassion as a weakness. Worse than the silent walkers themselves. Sarah sat near the broken window, staring out into the void. "We have to reach that base," she said quietly. "If there's any chance of safety, it's there." Malik nodded grimly. "But we have to be prepared for anything. These aren't just zombies we're fighting." Elena tapped furiously on her radio, the static still refusing to clear. "I tried every frequency. No signs of friendly forces. Whoever's at that base is either silent, or hostile." Jacob stood, pacing the room. "We can't turn back. We've come too far." A sudden noise outside made them all freeze, a faint scraping, like something being dragged. Their eyes darted toward the window. "Walkers?" Sam whispered, clutching his bear. Jacob shook his head. "No. This is something else." The door creaked, a shadow moving just beyond the threshold. Malik moved to block it with his knife drawn. Then the door slammed open. A man in tattered military fatigues stepped inside, eyes hard and calculating. He held a pistol, but lowered it slowly. "Who the hell are you?" the stranger demanded, voice sharp. Jacob stepped forward, rifle raised but steady. "We're survivors, like you. We're headed to the military base up north." The man's eyes narrowed. "That base isn't safe." "Not anymore." Jacob's heart sank. "Tell us what happened." The soldier glanced behind him nervously before stepping fully inside. "I'm Sergeant Reed. We held the base for weeks after the outbreak. Then things fell apart. The commanding officers, they went mad." Sarah's eyes widened. "Mad?" Reed nodded grimly. "They started enforcing brutal rules, shoot first, no exceptions. Anyone who couldn't pull their weight was left behind, or worse." Elena's voice was barely a whisper. "You mean they became like the walkers, only worse?" Reed looked away. Some of the soldiers turned on each other. Factions formed. "There's a small group still holding part of the base, but they won't open the gates to outsiders." Jacob clenched his fists. "We need that base. Supplies, weapons, a chance to fight back." Reed shook his head. "If you go there, you risk being shot on sight." A long silence fell over the room. The weight of Reed's words crushed their hope. Sam hugged his bear tighter. "What do we do now?" Jacob's mind raced. The base had been their destination, their beacon of hope. Now it felt like a trap. "We find another way," Jacob said, voice firm. "We don't give up." Reed looked at him, respect flickering in his eyes. "There's a safe house, an old communications tower east of here. It might have working radios. And food." Sarah looked at Jacob. "It's risky." Jacob nodded. "But it's a chance. We take it." Gathering their gear, the group prepared to move out, the weight of the unknown pressing down on them. As they stepped back into the fog-choked streets, Reed led the way with practiced caution. Every shadow seemed to pulse with threat, every sound a warning. Along the route, they passed scenes of devastation, burned-out cars, abandoned homes, silent witnesses to the city's fall. Suddenly, a harsh bark echoed behind them. Jacob spun, rifle raised. A snarling dog emerged from the fog, ribs showing beneath its matted fur. But behind it, chasing, came two silent walkers. Go! Reed shouted, firing a warning shot. The dog darted past them, barking frantically as the walkers lunged. Jacob lowered his rifle. That dog just saved us. Reed grimaced. Animals are rare now. Most have either fled or been turned. They pushed forward, the cityscape fading as they entered the outskirts. The communications tower loomed ahead, a skeletal structure reaching into the gray sky like a silent sentinel. Inside, the building was dark and cold, but surprisingly intact. Elena rushed to the radio equipment, fingers flying over controls. Static crackled, then, a voice. Clear but urgent. This is Alpha Team, survivors at Communications Tower, requesting assistance. Over. Elena's eyes shone with hope. We're not alone. Jacob allowed himself a brief moment of relief. But Reed's warning echoed in his mind. Survival in this new world meant more than fighting the dead. It meant facing the living who had lost their humanity. Outside, the fog swirled. The silent walkers waited. And somewhere, in the shadows, the real enemy watched. The radio crackled again, the faint voice from Alpha Team barely cutting through the static. Elena's hands trembled as she adjusted the dials, desperate to make sense of the garbled message. We've been trapped, surrounded, no reinforcements, need evac, coordinates. The voice was urgent but faded too quickly. Jacob stepped closer, his eyes narrowing. Did you catch that? Elena shook her head. Only bits and pieces, but it sounds like they're pinned down and desperate. Malik clenched his fists. We can't just sit here. We need to find them. Reed's face hardened. If we move out now, we risk walking straight into a trap. We don't even know who else is out there. Sarah swallowed hard. But if they're alive, we owe it to them to try. Jacob's gaze swept over the group. We don't have a choice. This might be our only chance to survive. The decision made, they packed their gear and left the communications tower, the fog swallowing them once more. The city around them was a ghostly ruin, twisted metal and shattered glass reflecting the pale morning light. As they moved, every sound became amplified, the crunch of broken pavement, the distant caw of a crow, the faintest shuffle of footsteps not their own. Jacob's senses sharpened. The silent walkers were out there, watching. Waiting. The group pushed forward, hearts pounding, every shadow a potential threat. Suddenly, from an alley to their left, a low growl erupted. A figure stumbled into the open, part human, part something else, its movements jerky and unnatural. Walker! Malik shouted, lunging forward with his knife. The creature snarled but then paused, eyes glowing with a strange intelligence. Jacob raised his rifle. Wait! The walker tilted its head, as if confused. Elena whispered, it's different, like it's still, aware. The group froze, unsure whether to fight or flee. The creature's growl softened into a low whine. Slowly, it backed into the fog, disappearing. Jacob exhaled slowly. Whatever's happening, these walkers are evolving. They continued on, more cautiously now. Hours later, they reached the outskirts of the military base, or what was left of it. The massive gates were shattered, rusted metal twisted like the remnants of a nightmare. Inside, silence reigned. Reed motioned for them to move carefully. Stay alert. This place is crawling with dangers. As they explored, signs of recent occupation became clear, makeshift barricades, burned-out vehicles, and graffiti warnings scrawled in desperate handwriting. Suddenly, voices echoed from a nearby building. Jacob signaled the group to take cover. Peering through a broken window, they saw a group of armed survivors. Not military, ragged, desperate, but organized. Looks like we found Alpha Team, Sarah whispered. Jacob watched as a tall woman barked orders, her face hardened by loss and battle. We need to find a way in, Jacob said. Maybe they can help us. Reed nodded. Or they'll see us as threats. Before they could decide, the ground trembled, a distant rumble growing louder. A horde of silent walkers appeared beyond the barricades, moving with terrifying speed and coordination. The survivors inside scrambled, weapons raised, preparing for a fight. Jacob's group was trapped. We have to help them, Jacob said firmly. The battle that followed was brutal and desperate. Gunfire echoed, flesh tore, and the air filled with the acrid stench of death. Jacob fought alongside Sarah and Malik, their movements fueled by adrenaline and sheer will. Elena worked to keep the radio alive, calling for backup that might never come. Sam stayed close, eyes wide but resolute. When the dust finally settled, the survivors had held their ground, but at a cost. Bodies littered the barricades, the line between friend and foe blurred in blood. The leader of the survivors approached Jacob, her eyes filled with weary gratitude. "We're running out of time," she said. "The silent walkers are adapting faster than we can fight." Jacob nodded. "Then we find another way. Together." As night fell, the battered group fortified their position, knowing the real fight was just beginning. Outside, the silent walkers circled like shadows in the dark, waiting for their moment to strike. And somewhere deep within the ruined city, a new horror was awakening. The night pressed heavily against the battered survivors, the darkness outside as suffocating as the fear clinging to their hearts. Inside the military compound, the small group huddled around a flickering lantern, voices low and tense. Jacob stared at the leader, a woman named Commander Reese, whose steely eyes had seen too much. "You said there's something more than just the walkers, that they're changing. What do you mean?" Reese's gaze darkened. "We thought it was just the dead wandering mindlessly, but that's not true. We've seen signs, walkers that remember. That hunt with purpose. That adapt." Sarah shivered. "How is that even possible?" Reed, standing nearby, pulled out a worn notebook. There were reports from a secret research facility, not far from here. Before everything fell apart, they were working on a virus, something to enhance human capabilities. Jacob's brow furrowed. A virus? Could it be connected to the outbreak? Reed nodded grimly. "We think it's what turned some walkers into something worse. Smarter. More dangerous." Elena leaned forward. "So these silent walkers aren't just dead bodies. They're evolving organisms." Reese added, "And that means our old strategies won't work. They learn from every encounter." The room fell silent as the weight of that realization sank in. Suddenly, a sharp noise shattered the quiet, a distant explosion followed by a series of gunshots. "Attack!" Malik shouted, grabbing his weapon. Chaos erupted outside as the walkers surged, smarter and more coordinated than ever before. The survivors scrambled to defend their fragile hold. Jacob found himself face to face with a silent walker unlike any he'd seen. Its eyes glowed faintly with unnatural light, and it moved with chilling precision. He fired, but the creature dodged effortlessly, slashing with a claw that barely missed Jacob's face. "Watch out!" Sarah yelled, pulling him back. The fight was brutal, the walkers relentless, but the survivors managed to hold the line, barely. As dawn broke, the attackers retreated into the mist, leaving behind broken bodies and shattered hope. Breathing heavily, Jacob turned to Reese. "We need to find that research facility. If this virus is the key, maybe we can stop this." Reese nodded. "It's dangerous, but it might be our only chance." Elena checked the radio again. "I'm picking up a faint signal, coordinates near the facility." The group exchanged looks, knowing the journey ahead could be their last. As they prepared to move, Sam tugged on Jacob's sleeve, whispering, "Are we going to be okay?" Jacob knelt down, meeting the boy's eyes. "We will be. We have to be." Outside, the silent walkers waited, patient and silent as ever, but now with something new, calculated menace. The fall of dead America was no longer just a fight for survival, it was a battle for the future of what humanity could become. Let me know when you're ready for Part 8, the thrilling conclusion. The road to the research facility was a narrow ribbon of cracked asphalt, flanked by overgrown trees whose skeletal branches clawed at the gray sky. Jacob led the group cautiously, every step heavy with tension. The weight of what lay ahead pressed down on them, the final hope to understand, maybe even reverse, the terror-consuming dead America. Stay close, Jacob warned, scanning the shadows. Sarah tightened her grip on her rifle, eyes flicking nervously toward every whisper of movement. Malik moved silently beside them, knife ready. Elena clutched her radio, fingers twitching with anticipation and fear. Sam stayed close to Jacob, his small hand gripping the older man's jacket. Despite the danger, the boy's wide eyes held a flicker of hope. The facility loomed ahead, an old, fortified lab complex, battered but intact. Its rusted gates creaked as they pushed inside, the air thick with chemical residue and stale fear. Inside, fluorescent lights flickered sporadically, casting long, eerie shadows. The silence was broken only by their footsteps and the distant drip of water. "Look," Elena whispered, pointing to walls scrawled with hastily written notes and diagrams, virus structures, containment protocols, and a chilling list of experiments. Reed knelt by a dusty terminal, fingers moving over the cracked screen. "If this virus mutated inside the walkers, it explains their evolution. They're not just dead, they're something new." Suddenly, a low mechanical hum filled the air. Lights shifted, and a hidden door slid open, revealing a dark corridor. "We're not alone," Reese said, voice taut. From the shadows, a group of hostile survivors emerged, heavily armed, faces grim and eyes hardened by desperation. "You shouldn't have come here," their leader snarled. "This place is ours now. Leave, or die." Jacob stepped forward. "We're here to end this nightmare. To stop the silent walkers." The man laughed bitterly. "You can't stop what you don't understand. This virus, it's the future." Gunfire erupted. Chaos exploded in the narrow corridors. The survivors fought fiercely, desperation fueling every shot. Jacob's group fought back with everything they had, rifles blazing, knives flashing. Amidst the turmoil, the real horror returned, the silent walkers. Drawn by the noise, they surged into the facility, their eyes glowing with that unnatural light. But this time, they weren't alone. The walkers moved with terrifying intelligence, coordinating attacks that pushed even the armed survivors to their limits. Jacob found himself face to face with a glowing-eyed walker, the creature's jaws snapping inches from his face. He fired, and the creature fell, but others took its place instantly. Amid the chaos, Elena managed to access the facility's main terminal. "There's a containment chamber," she shouted. "We can isolate the virus samples." Reese nodded. "Do it. We have to stop this." With cover fire from Malik and Sarah, Elena moved quickly, typing commands into the terminal. Doors sealed, systems powered down. The lab hummed, locking away the source of the outbreak. Suddenly, the building shook, explosions rocked the walls. "Time's running out," Reed yelled. They fought their way back toward the exit, silent walkers and hostile survivors close behind. Outside, the sky cracked with thunder, rain pouring down in sheets, washing the blood and fear into the streets. Jacob led the group through the pouring rain, the weight of survival heavier than ever. As they reached a hill overlooking the ruined city, they paused. Behind them, the facility sealed itself off, a tomb for the virus. In the distance, the silent walkers moved like shadows through the mist. Jacob looked at his group, scarred, weary, but alive. "We may have won this battle," he said quietly, "but the war for dead America is far from over." Sarah placed a hand on his shoulder. "But we have hope now. Hope that we can rebuild." Fight back. Sam smiled weakly, clutching his bear. Jacob breathed in the cold night air, eyes scanning the horizon. The silent walkers were silent no longer, but neither were the survivors. And as the dawn broke over the fallen nation, a fragile promise of a new beginning stirred in the hearts of the living. The story is complete. Would you like help turning these into narration scripts or video outlines?